Bear down, Windy City, Alex Highsmith, Chicago Bears. That is not a rumor. That is what is happening right now while the draft clock is ticking, and Halas Hall has the phone in hand. 35 total sacks last season, 27th in rushing yards allowed. This defense needs a killer on the edge. And the name Ryan Poles has on his screen right now is one nobody expected to see landing in the Windy City. But there are two more things connected to this move that completely change the picture for Chicago's draft. One has to do with what Jaylon Johnson revealed this week about Ben Johnson. And I promise you, when you hear it, you are going to understand why this team is not the same anymore. And the other one is a silent race between the Bears and their division rivals for a prospect that both teams want and only one can have. Everything is connected. Everything explodes in the next 5 days. Hit that like button if you are Bear Nation. Subscribe if you trust polls. And do not go anywhere, because Highsmith to Chicago is just the beginning of what we are breaking down for you today. Okay, let's talk about the most urgent problem on this defense. 35 sacks all of last season, 35. That is a bottom-of-the-league number for any defensive coordinator who wants to win a playoff game. And the solution they had in place, Dayo Odeyingbo, ended up with a torn Achilles after 1 sack in 8 games. 1 sack, 8 games. Man, that still stings. The plan A was Dexter Lawrence. And yeah, I get it. 3-time Pro Bowl interior tackle, dominant against the run, the kind of piece that completely reorganizes your defensive front. But the Giants shipped him to Cincinnati for the number 10 overall pick. The number 10, the Bears never could have matched that, and they shouldn't have tried. So what's next? According to Charles Robinson at Yahoo Sports, the Pittsburgh Steelers are open to listening on Alex Highsmith. They're not actively pushing a trade out there. But if the phone rings, they will answer it, and the reason is straightforward. They have Nick Herbig, young, ascending, productive, rotating, next to Highsmith and T.J. Watt. A high-level executive told Robinson directly, quote, "I think they will trade one of them," end quote. Now let me break down why this actually makes sense for the Bears. And this isn't just a we need an edge rusher. This edge rusher is available situation. Highsmith is 29 years old. He has finished with 6 or more sacks in virtually every full season he has played. In 2022, he posted 14.5 sacks in 17 games. That is not a rotational number. That is a legitimate starting edge rusher number, and over the last 2 seasons combined, he put up 15.5 sacks, and that's with 10 games missed due to injury. Last year alone, he finished with 9.5 sacks in 13 games, but here's the part that stands out the most to me. Highsmith is not just a pass rusher. In 2025, he posted an 82.0 run defense grade from Pro Football Focus, ranking 5th at his position across the entire league. The Bears ranked 27th in yards allowed per carry last season. 27th, one trade fixes both of the most critical weaknesses on this defense at the same time. The cost, reports suggest a 3rd-round pick. The Bears hold 3rd-round picks both this year and next. The contract carries base salaries of $14.5 million and $15.5 million over the 2 remaining years, with a clean-out clause in 2027 if things don't work out. Look, I could be wrong. The injury history is real, and it's fair to worry about it. But the alternative is betting on a rookie to be your difference-making edge rusher on a team with Super Bowl ambitions. That's just as big of a gamble, and getting Highsmith done before the draft frees up Ryan Poles to ignore the position in round 1 entirely, or attack it later in the draft at better value. The real question is whether Poles makes that call this week, because the draft is in 5 days, and if you want this trade done before everything kicks off at Halas Hall, the clock is running. Before we get into the draft board, I need y'all to sit with something for a second, because Jaylon Johnson said something on Chris Long's Green Light podcast that made me go back and listen to it twice. He's describing his first impression of Ben Johnson, and he says this, quote, "For me, the biggest takeaway was, we're not trying to win. We're trying to blow people out. I never heard nobody say that," end quote. Pause on that. Jaylon Johnson has been in the NFL for 6 years, 2-time Pro Bowler. He was in this building under Matt Nagy. He was here under Matt Eberflus. The message he got for years was compete, limit mistakes, find ways to win. Ben Johnson walked in on day 1 and burned that entire mentality to the ground. And here's the context that makes this quote even heavier. Remember Thanksgiving 2024 in Detroit? After another late-game collapse, Jaylon Johnson went into the locker room and went off on the coaching staff in what Fox Sports' Jay Glazer described as, Quote, very colorful language for 10 to 15 minutes straight. Eberflus was fired the next day. This is not a passive player. This is a guy who demands accountability from his coaches when they stop doing their jobs. So when he says he never once heard a coach demand total domination, that tells you everything about the standard that was normalized inside that building for years. Now, here's where the tension comes in, bro. Jaylon Johnson has to actually back it up. In 2026, last season was rough. A groin injury that required surgery wiped out his training camp, his preseason, and almost his entire regular season. In 7 games, he allowed a 72.7% catch rate and 17.2 yards per reception. Those are not the numbers of a guy who's supposed to be your number one corner. Ben Johnson said it directly at the NFL owners' meetings in March. Quote, we're a better team. We're certainly a better defense when those two guys are out there, end quote. He was talking about Jaylon Johnson and nickelback Kyler Gordon, who was also limited to 3 games last year. And there's one more piece to this. The Bears lost 18 of their 23 interceptions from the previous year in free agency this offseason. Somebody has to replace that production. The most logical candidate on this roster is Jaylon Johnson, but only if he's actually on the field. The talent is there. The winning mentality that Ben Johnson installed is there. Now, Jaylon Johnson has to stay healthy and prove it. And since we're talking edges, the universe seems determined to make the Bears sweat a little before Thursday night. Keldrick Faulk, edge out of Auburn, 6'6", 276 pounds, arms longer than 34 inches. One of the most complete edge prospects in this entire class, with the versatility to kick inside on sub packages and elite frame. And he is just 20 years old. The Bears clearly have him on their short list for the number 25 overall pick. The problem, the Detroit Lions hold pick number 17. Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have been evaluating Faulk for that big end role opposite Aiden Hutchinson, a position Detroit has needed to fill for a while now. Tim Twentyman from the Lions official website described him as having the exact frame and athleticism Detroit likes to deploy in that role, with the versatility that defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard loves in his players. Beat reporters tracking this situation in Chicago are flagging it clearly. There is a genuine race for Faulk between the Bears and the Lions, with Detroit holding 8 picks of priority. Navy and Orange fans in the Windy City are watching this one closely. And if the Lions take Faulk at 17, Poles needs a clean plan B already locked in. That's where the Highsmith trade gets even more urgent, or that's where the Chad Reuter mock draft from NFL.com starts making a lot of sense, trading back with Miami, picking up an extra 3rd-round pick, and taking safety Dylan Thieneman at 25 to fill a real void left by Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker walking out the door this offseason. Poles has built this roster by being smart with draft capital. It would not surprise me at all if there are multiple scenarios already mapped out at Halas Hall, depending on how the board falls Thursday night. But if Faulk is still sitting there at 25, fam, that decision makes itself 5 days. 5 days for all of this to come together. This is what makes being a Bears fan right now feel genuinely different. We're not talking about hoping someone shows up and fixes things. We're talking about a franchise quarterback, a head coach who walked in and told his guys the goal is to blow people out, and a general manager with real tools to work with heading into this draft. The Highsmith trade, the Faulk drama, the right extension sitting on the table, all of it gets decided in the next 5 days. And I believe Poles has a plan. Drop it in the comments right now. Do the Bears make the Highsmith trade before the draft? Or do they trust the board at 25? I want to read every single one of your takes. And if this video got you fired up, fam, leave that like it takes 2 seconds. And it means everything for Da Bears content to keep coming. Bear down.